I was getting ready to try to change this here when I realized that I did not include my fists. The fists are currently not in this map, essentially. So what I realized is that I have to add them to my zone, and I did all this without recording. I thought I was recording. Actually, I think I need to move freeze controls up to here, because I don't want the player to have frozen controls. It's only so that the sound playing. I don't need that any other time. I think the fist should work, but I'm gonna try setting them as the player's melee weapon, which means I'm gonna need to save the old melee weapon, because we're gonna have to eventually unset it. And then down here, I have made it set the player weapon to, we need to do self dot old melee. I forgot that I had this value and that it needs to be set. So let us actually set that in here. I was going to set it in the think function so that it wasn't done here, but I think that I don't think that's going to be a good idea, to be honest. So let's do a couple things to give ourselves some areas to note that so that we know it's getting to specific areas of the code, so we know what's running those specific things. So something we do as scripters is we do I print line. You can just do, there's a couple things. There's I print line, and I print bold. I prefer I print bold. It prints a message to the screen, and when you see that message printed to the screen, you know that that part of your code is getting run. And it's a really good way to indicate whether or not something is getting run. Just write a little something that tells us what is supposed to be happening right now. I do actually want to change this button, because right now it's button 4, but it should be button 3 to the best of my knowledge. They're real descriptive with these, really descriptive. Really hoping this works. I've changed the action slot button. Oh, okay, so apparently time is ending instantly. That would be the cause. I was being dumb. Now, get time returns the system time in milliseconds, okay? And this value is just 20. So essentially what this was doing is this was ending in 20 milliseconds. So what we have to do is we have to multiply this value by 1,000, and that'll give us 20,000 milliseconds, which is 20 seconds. So let's just do that real quick. And there we go. Actually, instead of doing that, what will happen is this will get this statement will get evaluated every time. Instead of doing that, what we can do is we can save this as a variable. So we do is less than time. So time equals this variable. That way, this only has to be evaluated once. Time saves the value of this variable, and it effectively saves us time, because it doesn't have to process this value every time it checks the condition of this loop, which is gonna be quite frequently. Now that we've got that figured out, we can probably get rid of these. I'll keep them for now, just in case we run into a different problem. I want to take a moment to first disable weapon swapping. want to take the time to handle if the player disconnects, since we're here, since we should have everything working. My concern is that the player disconnects and leaves everyone else invisible. Might actually be a bad idea. If we just have everything end on disconnect. Yeah, this should just end on disconnect as well. I think we need to get rid of this. We'll just have everything else end on disconnect. Yes, we want this to end on disconnect as well. So all of these functions can just end on disconnect, because the player is not going to exist at this point, which means calling anything on self is probably going to cause a crash of some sort. So we want to end this on disconnect as well. Alright. Of course someone has to be mowing outside right now, but yeah, let's just get into this. Hey, there we go. There's our fist. We cannot swap weapons. I'm trying to swap weapons right now. You can hear my scroll wheel probably. We are invulnerable. We gotta change some stuff about the fist, because we either need to bump up the damage, or we need to do some script magic to make sure that we're gonna have to do some script magic to do that AoE I was talking about, the area of effect damage on the zombies. 1-inch punch does use that, so I might be able to borrow a couple things from that. Hey, and there we go. You can see that the second time we don't have to get locked into place. And then, we also need to do the Gobble thing. We got all the fists working, we got the perk working, we got the shader working. It gets taken away once the effect is done. So a good majority of the scripting is done, honestly. But there are still a couple things that we need to take care of. So, So I've realized that some of this stuff here is unnecessary. We don't need stop. We actually just don't need it. What we can do instead is, instead of stop, we can just get time here, because we don't need to save the value of the time. We just need the value of the time. So there's no point in having stop. It's just an extra variable that's wasted, an extra calculation that doesn't need to be made. Someone has sent me the scripts for burned out the Gobblegum, and I requested them because I wanted to make it so that when the player gets hit by a zombie, it applies the burnout effect. This is just going to be so that it's just a cool effect, I think. Widow's Wine handles what happens when a player gets hit by a zombie, and that is something that we're going to need here. I don't have all of the Gobblegum scripts, and I'd rather handle it the perk way, honestly. So we're going to look for a register And this register is going to be perk damage override function right here. This comes from the Perk script. And what this does is it registers a function that happens when a player gets hit. So if we follow this function that gets fed as a parameter, you'll see that there's all these parameters that this function gets so that you can do whatever the heck you want inside this function. And this makes it so that the player does not get hurt by Widow's Wine grenades. And then this handles if the player gets hit, it's slapped by a zombie. We'll just put it right up here. Just put 2 lines down, and then we'll get a Brawlstar punch damage callback. Here, we want this part. I think what this does is these only get checked if the player has the perk, because it's run through the perk script as a damage override for the perk. So I'm pretty sure these only get checked when the player has the specific perk. So I shouldn't have to check if the player has Brawlstar punch. It should just automatically like function. But I am going to have to check if the player has Brawlstar punch activated. We want to return 0 here because we don't want the player to get damaged. Even though they're invulnerable currently, I would prefer just to be on the safe side and put the 0 there so that they don't take damage. This 0 right here is the amount of damage. So I damage is the amount of damage that's being done to the player that we're looking to modify. So when we return 0, that means we're telling the function that this gets called from that the player takes no damage here. Means of death is the thing that was hitting the player basically. So if it's mod melee, that means it's like a melee attack. And if the attacker is an AI, so what you're checking here is if the player was melee hit by an AI. So that's what you're checking here. Or we're checking if they were hit by an explosive damage from a vehicle attacker. Now, what this Widow's Wine is specifically made for Shadows of Evil, so what this applies to specifically the wraps. So if someone wants to put wraps in their map, this works with them. It should work with them. Just like Burned Out, because Burned Out has that functionality in it as well. So we want to thread Brawlstar Punch Burn, something like that. This is where we look at our Burned Out script. So this is what we want right here. All of that copy pasted in. Let's just reformat this a little bit to be to my liking. Now, if the zombie is supposed to ignore a nuke, and the zombie is ignoring a nuke, then we skip this. It's a trade thing, I guess. If this value is defined on the zombie and they are marked for death, then we skip them. If they have a magic bullet shield, I've never used a magic bullet shield. I don't know exactly what it does. I just know that it's supposed to protect the zombies from death. And I think that's used mostly for bosses and not for normal zombies. So yeah. Then we check if it's a vehicle. If the zombie's a vehicle, we do this specific FX for them, which is a vehicle FX. If they're not, that means they're a normal zombie. Then we do the actor FX instead of the vehicle FX, because zombies are just actors. They're really, really good actors, you know? After that, we run through here. Okay. And then we wait a network frame. And what this does is it allows the server to process all the events that are happening. It allows everything to catch up. And be ready for this iteration of the loop. Now again, we check if the target is defined, if it hasn't been killed yet. And then after that, we check again if it has a magic shield. If it's somehow it got a shield enabled between its iteration of this loop and when this looks at it, then we don't want to kill it because that would be bad. It has a shield on. Okay, and then if these two things check out, that means the target is valid and we just deal a butt ton of damage to it. So we take the target's own health, and then Treyarch likes to add 666 to it to be devilish. And like I said, we don't need this. So basically, if these things all check out, we kill it. It's that simple. So that's Burned Out in a nutshell. Yeah, I don't think we have to bother with the CSC as long as all of these client fields are registered without me having to register them. And the way that would happen is because these scripts are loaded by the game. They're not existent within the mod tools that we are provided. If I go ahead and open up this, you'll never find a Gobblegum script in here. Like, you can see the ZM BGB, but this is just a placeholder script. It doesn't actually have anything to it. You can see that there's no functionality here. There's functions, but they don't do anything. They just start and then end. That's it. We don't have direct access to the Gobblegums. Even though they are loaded in the game, so if you want to use a Gobblegum, a function from a Gobblegum, all you got to do is know what the name of the script is, and then what the name of the function is, and you can call it without having to actually have the Gobblegum script. I just wanted this portion and I wanted to customize it, so I needed the script. I needed the actual script for it. The next thing, which is a zombie damage callback. This is a player damage callback. We need a zombie damage callback. And the reason we need that is so that I can boost the damage of the fist while you're in Brawlstar mode without actually editing the damage value in APE. And the reason we want to do that is in case we want to use the fists as like just a regular weapon within the map, because you can do that. You can give it to the player as a starting weapon or as a reward weapon. But what we want to do is we want to have a function that makes our fists deal a bunch of damage to the zombies, but only while we're in Brawlstar mode. Okay, so this goes to the spawner, which I knew in the back of my head because I went through Widow's Wine to find functions, because the best way to create something new is to look at an existing script that does pretty much the same thing and kind of like see how they do it and tweak it, like if you don't know how it's done already. So that's why I'm referencing all these other scripts that either I've made or that were our default scripts from Treyarch, or even some that other people have made too, or are things that you can reference. We don't want a death event, we want a damage event, which means I'm gonna have to go into ZM Spawner and find that. Okay, actually it's right here. It's literally right above it. This is what we want. Getting our function in here, so we do register zombie damage callback. And what this does is when a zombie gets damaged, it will check all of these damage callbacks and find the right one that applies. String mod, so this is the same up here as means of death. It's the same thing, just with a different name. The hit location is where the zombie takes the damage. That could be leg, chest, torso, arm, head. The hit origin is where it came from, which is, this would be vertex, so that's typically probably the player's muzzle, like where the muzzle of the gun. This is the player, which I do believe that's the player that dealt the damage. Inflictor is what dealt the damage, and that can be either a player or something like a trap, or say the Civil Protector, which is also in Shadows of Evil. I guess we do the same thing that they do for here. Okay, this checks for an insta kill. We should probably do that. I think I know what I'm doing. Return true, and then we change amount. The base damage that I gave the fist is 150. So what we want to do, times equals or I could just flat out change the value. Let's do that instead. So I realize what's going on here now. Returning true means that the zombies don't take damage from it. So we don't want to return true no matter what. But we do need to return false no matter what at some point. Return false. We can either just do an amount. You know what? I think if this doesn't work, what we need to do is, I'll comment this out, but leave it here. We need to do self do damage just like they did up here. Alright, so if this doesn't modify the damage, we just need to delete that, uncomment this, and then that should do the trick. This will not give the player points for killing zombies, so we need to keep that in mind. If we want to give the player a couple points for each kill they get, we can add something in here to give the player points if the zombie dies. So what we would do is let's just add it in right now. If self.health, that should be it, right? Is less than or equal to the damage, then we do player ZM score. Okay, add the player score. And then we just say how many points we want to give, and we'll make that a define like I mentioned. And I'm pretty confident that this won't work actually, so we'll just end up using this instead, which is a good reason I've done it in advance. Right now I want to fix this. Okay, so I've found what I need, and this is why it's good to look through the default scripts, because you can find little stuff like this that allows you to do overrides for default functions. This is stuff that Treyarch thought up, that they were like, hey, we might need this in the future, or hey, this would be a cool thing to have in case someone needed it. So what we have here is level.custom_perk validation, and what we're going to do is this function is most likely not defined anywhere, and this is the only place it's used in this file. So what this allows us to do is this loop right here checks if the player can buy a perk. So what we're going to do is we're going to take level.custom_perk validation, and we are going to set that as a value, and that value is going to be a function that returns a value. So instead of doing this, we're going to have something a little bit easier. If self should still be player here, right? No, actually, player is a value that is a parameter. And that's all there is to it. Simple as that. If we return false here, that means that this evaluates to true, which means we continue this loop, which means players unable to buy the perk. So that works out perfectly. That works out perfectly. Let's get into the map. And I forgot to check whether or not ZM spawner was in my using statements. So let's just go up here, add that back in, or add that in, rather. It was never in the first place. ZM spawner. I've gotten an error. Brawlstar watch uses. Oh, you know what? Yep. Okay, I forgot to delete that. It doesn't need to be a thing anymore. Okay. We don't have an error for the client fields yet. We'll see if that ends up happening. I think I may have reversed the true and false values here. Oh wait, that's why. Self.Brawlstar uses. Again, another rookie mistake, but it's bound to happen. It's really just bound to happen. Use the moment of truth. There we go. I love that music, man. I love it. So we've got our Brawlstar perk, and now we gotta activate it. Okay. Oh yeah, look at that. Bam. Bam. So let's get hit by one. Okay, we might need to disable invulnerability. I don't think the burned out effect applies if we're invulnerable. We'll just activate it. Okay, so our damage override is not doing anything, which means we're gonna have to, like I feared, it's not doing anything, so we're gonna have to uncomment that line that we've commented. So that's only natural. Hey, there we go. Now I can't buy the perk. Look at that. I cannot buy the perk anymore. So hey, that works. That works. Alright, so I need to fix the invulnerable thing, because now that we have the damage override, we don't need to make the player invulnerable. They're hello. Now that we have the damage override, we don't need to make the player invulnerable. They already are, because of the damage override. Because we return 0 as the damage the player takes. I changed this up here to self equals perk machine, because self is not player here anymore. Get rid of it right now. We don't need to enable invulnerability, so we don't need to disable invulnerability. We should be good to test out all this stuff up here. All the burned out stuff that we've added. If we crash, that means that the client fields are not set up by default, which is not good for me because I'll have to have a bunch of client fields in, but we can do it. It's not difficult. So we actually want to copy paste this into here, since I didn't earlier, to actually give the player their score. So it seems I've made the same rookie mistake again of not putting a using statement for ZM score. I sometimes just assume that these things are already in the script, even though they very much are not. And I should have been able to tell that by... Oops. I know how to type. Hey, there we go! Okay, let's go! We don't need to register the FX. I'm going to seriously reduce the range of that, because that was mental. Melee damage, go brrrrrr. Alright, and as you can see, we're doing big damage now. And that modification that we made to damage callback on the zombies is functioning properly. But you were able to see that we aren't getting double points for it. And honestly, it's something that's really easy to add, something I can add. So May as well go and do it. Holy crap, 720. That's our range here. And distance squared is not used anywhere in here, so we can probably get rid of that. This is 720 units. Now, if you haven't read the doc mod tools HTML file of, I believe it was scale standards, 1 unit in radiant is 1 inch. So that means each of these should be an inch, which means this is what? 72 is 6 foot. So this is 60 feet. The radius is 60 feet, something like that. That is mental. That's why the zombies were dying from so far away. So we're gonna want to tone that down quite a bit. I'm thinking like maybe 10 feet. So let's give that a big ol' 120 instead of 720. What I feared is that the player would still be able to throw grenades while they were in Brawlstar mode, and they can. So, we can also get rid of this because those are loaded, we don't need those. We're going to have to, I think increment is drinking. And what that does is it basically says the player is drinking a perk. Or I think the package machine uses it as well, but it stops the player from being able to interact with triggers, which includes perk machines, barriers, I do believe, wall buys as well, which would mess up the whole effect. Throw grenades, they shouldn't be able to throw grenades while they're drinking. So let's just try that out. That is a ZM utility function. So this disables offhand weapons and weapon cycling. So this says if you're currently not drinking something, it disables your offhand weapons and then disables your weapon cycling. And then it does the increment. So we can go ahead and get rid of our disable weapon cycling because this should do it all for us. And then once the effect is over, we can just decrement is drinking, I do believe. Clear, here we go. Right here we disable weapon cycling, but instead we want to increment is drinking, and this is a ZM utility function. My brain is working right now because I'm double checking to make sure that we have the util, and that's the wrong one. This is the right one.